my china, my oak. Andy Rice, can you copy my accent? How's it? No, that was quite camp. We're talking. Say it again.
How's it, Bruce?
How's it, Andy? How you doing? We're talking blokish advertising.
Yep.
That's why I'm behaving like a bit like a bloke, because I don't normally. What is blokish advertising?
Well, I suppose it's a genre of advertising that tries to reflect the behaviour of people in a stereotypical masculine manner. Usually not particularly PC. Indeed, it could almost be a counterpoint to political correctness in advertising, or perhaps political correctness in advertising more accurately as a counterpoint to blokishness, because I suspect that blokishness has been a device used by creative agencies for longer than the opposite.
So an advert, say a Nike or an Adidas advert, for example, showing a performance athlete doing their very best, is not blokish. It's a man.
Masculine.
It's masculine. It's manly.
Sporty. Blokish is when
it's Jeremy Clarkson-ish.
Top Gear is the perfect benchmark for blokishness. If that was an ad,
yes,
that whole culture, subculture, that defines blokish. So it's very common in certain categories. It's typically a beer and liquor category when the lads are getting together. So brands like Budweiser.
What's that?
That's very much.
If you don't, please don't switch off. If you don't know what we're talking about, it's a Superbowl advert from probably 10
12
years ago.
Yes.
Just go "What's up" and Budweiser, WAZZUUUP. You'll find it somewhere. It's really worth watching. And
it has no logic. It has no script, no nothing. It is just
blokes phoning each other and buzzing each other's front doorbells, going "What's up?" That's blokish.
It's the language of blokism. That's what it boils down to.
Blokism, is that a word?
It is now, Bridge.
It is now. Well, we should write that down.
So there are other good examples. People will probably have seen that Heineken ad that was doing the rounds maybe 5 years ago of the wives and girlfriends being shown around a new home, and when they arrive at the walk-in shoe closet, they scream and go faint. And then from the other side of the house, you can hear a similar masculine shouting going on because the boys have found the walk-in Heineken fridge. And so that kind of response is a good example of blokish behaviour.
But that seemed to be taking out the Mickey out of blokes. That it was playing on two stereotypes: the silly girly sort of stereotype, and blokes being not blokes but being quite girly in their blokishness.
Well, I'm not sure that's entirely true of that Heineken one, because they were basically saying the greatest thing about this mansion is the fact that it has a walk-in Heineken fridge. So, and locally examples, I would say that perhaps Savannah is pretty good at doing it. If you look at the Savannah's Got Apples campaign that's running at the moment, it's quite blokish behaviour of the guy at the office party who usurps his boss and grabs the last sausage roll. And I think it's, in many ways, it caters for the well-suppressed masculine desire to say, yes, that's what I would have done. But perhaps I daren't because I'll get the living daylights knocked out of me by she who must be obeyed.
So in a 21st century, more sensitive, caring, equal society, does blokish advertising work?
Well, I think it does. I think I rather believe that these assumptions that we're moving away from blokishness are wishful thinking rather than strongly evidenced fact. I found a quotation from Alan Clark, who is the head of SAB worldwide, and he said, talking about this trend, he said, "Beer has moved away from the lager lout college frat impact," said Alan Clark, head of SAB Miller. "Beer now has associations with fashion, art and design. The world has moved on from lads telling jokes on a Saturday and high-volume consumption. Beer is now drunk by women and men together." I think that is a projection of a desired future, very much more than an accurate picture.
You just want people to drink flying fish.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the growth potential comes from mixed gender occasions and from bringing women into a category, viz. Beer, which they were seen to be excluded from. But equally, you can look at SAB's latest product launch, which would be Carling Blue Label. It's absolutely pitched at men, and as far as I can recall, I stand to be corrected, but I don't think there's any females in the television advertising. It's the lads together again. Not particularly blokish, rather more taking on the...
It's masculine.
It's masculine, and it's taking on spirits more than other beers.
I did see the advert, and I did watch the pour, and the pour is the sell in beer because it makes you want it.
Yeah.
And I promptly went out, and I went to a pub, and I had one.
And
one.
Your conclusion?
It's a good advert.
Yes. So I think that the masculine environment for beer drinking is still the norm, no matter how much there may be plans to change it. But I come back to that point that I think it's a way that guys can express their innate blokishness through a third party, through an advertisement. Indeed, in qualitative market research, we talk about projective techniques, where you don't say, Bruce, what do you think of this? But you say, Bruce, what do you think Bob thinks of this? So that you can transfer and project the response onto Bob, and you don't have to admit to your own value systems or your own desires. And I think that blokish advertising is a vicarious opportunity for men to support their inner blokishness.
Is it restricted to beer? I mean, the Castle ads of the guys getting together at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch the rugby, or late at night to watch the rugby, and the cases of Castle being brought, all of that sort of stuff. It seems to be quite narrowly focused on the booze category.
No, well, I don't think entirely. I mean, if you look at Superbowl this year, which is always the launching pad for a lot of new thinking in advertising and a lot of rehashing of old thinking in advertising, there were a couple of quite blokish ads there, and neither of them was for beer. One was for Doritos chips.
Well, you can't have Doritos without beer, so it's the same thing.
Well, this was in a maternity ward where where it's actually worth having a look on YouTube. It's called Ultrasound, and basically the husband is eating Doritos while his wife is having her final scan, and as he passes the Dorito over his wife's stomach, so the baby responds to it, and there's a predictable denouement as well. The other one was automotive, I think, is a category in which you can get some blokishness. So there was
Bucky adverts. Bucky adverts.
Absolutely, yeah. But this was for an Audi R8, and it ended up actually with a line that I don't think would be allowed in some markets, which was simply that it was the 205 miles per hour R8 is here, which is a celebration of speed and outright performance that I'm not sure that most markets would tolerate. So blokishness can, although it's usually quite disparaging to the other gender, to women, in some instances it can be more disparaging to societal norms. And I think in this case, where people object to the cars that can do 205 miles an hour, what's that, 320
it's very fast.
per hour. Yeah, it's very fast.
But is blokish advertising always quite overt? Or can it be quite subtle? Because that's quite a subtle blokish ad, because there'll be women who quite like cars that can go a squillion miles an hour.
Well, I don't think blokes are very subtle, so it's quite difficult to make blokish advertising subtle. But you can get them out of those are two examples of categories where blokishness works. Another one might be Axe deodorant. I think there's a subtle difference between blokishness and laddishness. I think blokishness...
Oh, now we get
exactly.
particular.
I think blokishness is a more mature, self-confident version of laddishness. So laddishness is where the Axe protagonist thinks that he's going to hop into bed with Claudia Schiffer because he wears Axe. It's the nerd transformation genre, whereas I think blokish is a little bit more adult. And laddish magazines in many markets have failed. So there were a whole genre.
The FHMs of the world
and Loaded and all of those. They've closed down or gone digital only because that laddishness is disappearing. But I think blokishness is still going quite strong. There's that locally again, that First for Women campaign, which is quite interesting because the product is aimed at women by its very name, but it uses the stupidity, in inverted commas, of blokish behaviour as the reason why all women should go to First for Women. So driving backwards to Cape Town for a bet was the one that I recall, and 4 blokes in a car.
Which is why we only insure women.
Exactly. Yeah. So that they're using blokishness as something not to be admired, but something to be rebelled against.
Felicity is an old-fashioned kind of gal. There's Felicity. Forgive me, Felicity. I hope that's okay. Why shouldn't blokes be allowed to be blokes? Up with the blokes, I say.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, particularly coming from a woman, because there are whole papers written on the emasculation of the male gender in advertising terms. The really dwarf house husband who gets everything wrong is quite a common genre in itself.
No, it's just real. It's reflecting a real. Oh, sorry. No, I'm not projecting.
Hello.
And my favourite Heineken ad, by the way, I really did like the first 100 times I saw the ad with the house and the Heineken fridge, walk-in fridge. But there was another one that had Jennifer Aniston in it, and there's the last pack of Heineken on the top shelf, and Lad comes up. It was Lad. That was more Lad, I think.
Yeah.
And she looks and she points up, and he looks at her and looks at the beer and looks at her and reaches up and gets the beer and puts it under his arm and walks off with the beer. He missed the opportunity to chat up Jennifer Aniston. But then it's Heineken.
I think the most Blokeish ad that I can recall was for Bud Light, where they
you have to, yes,
where they set up a situation where a consumer, just a regular customer, was identified, and he was ambushed and taken through a whole scenario of events which were the absolute epitome of Blokeish ambition. So the model for dinner and the fast car and everything else. And he had this extraordinary one-of-a-kind evening, courtesy of Bud Light, in which he went through every possible chapter of the book of Blokeishness.
What a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm game.
Well, have a word with, now that they're going to be here in force, AB and Bev, when you're doing your next interview of Carlos Brito, whatever his name is, then say, I would like to be put forward as a candidate for the next Bud Light commercial, please.
That's why he doesn't come to the studio. Andy Rice is our advertising and branding guru. He's my brew, he's my china, he's the oak, what does the advertising on a Tuesday night on Laddish. And, of course, the more boorish, Blokeish advertising. Does it work? Well, of course it works when it's used properly.